Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Eric Robertson, and I am here to talk about trauma, childhood abuse, bullying, healing, self-realization, the spiritual path, and God's grace. And at the risk of sounding like an evangelist, and I'll also be reading a part of my book today. So I'm just taking off the glasses so there's less shimmer on the glasses in your image for you. Well, as far as my last video goes, I'd like to point something out, and that is that in two settings I did talk about my father's behavior in a rather derogatory but factual way. And I'd like to point out that, of course, there's immense love and gratitude for both my parents who have both left this planet a long time ago. And yet, there's no sugarcoating bad behavior. And my beloved friend and teacher, Baba, always says, he says, look, when things go wrong with kids, he says, two parties are to blame, parents and teachers. And he's very clear about that. And I have painfully discovered in my own life how true that is. And I've also, by God's grace, discovered how in the opposite, the reverse is true as well. So that when parents are loving, strict parents and teachers are loving, strict teachers, then you get fantastic pupils. And if you look at some of the most successful people in any field whatsoever, they all have great love and gratitude and admiration for their parents and their teachers. And the recent one is the great Will Smith movie where, the two sisters, the tennis players, Williamson. Anyway, beautiful. And how their dad just coached them and never gave up on them and always was there for him. And that brings us to an interesting point, which is, of course, sacrifice. And of course, I'm immensely grateful to my parents, my grandparents, their grandparents, all my ancestors, all my teachers, all my spiritual teachers, and everybody who's taken the effort to help me along my path. Now, having said that, I would like to talk a little more with you today about trauma. And trauma is probably the most underestimated mental affliction there is on the planet. And when you look at the fact that there are millions of people who are suffering from depression, there are tens, if not hundreds of millions on antidepressants. There are tens, if not hundreds of millions of people depressed, lonely, psychiatric, in the sense that they've had some label of a psychiatric disease. And my feeling is that it is time for us, for me, to champion the introverts, because so many people who, like myself, are introverted, or at least a little bit of both, but not extroverted, have become that way due to some form of trauma. And what I've realized in my own life, that the effect of trauma and the standard three response you have, which is fight, flight, or freeze, for those of you who are not familiar with that, when there is some shock to your system, on an animal level, most of us freeze, right? Like the hair in the spotlights of your car, they're like, and they just freeze. And you're standing there in the middle of the road and you're like, come on, hop across the road, and the rabbit is just frozen. and it can't help itself because it only has the animal brain. So see, so there's a few things, right? We all have the reptilian brain, which is the dinosaur brain, and that just has two modi, which is either I eat you or you eat me. There's no other options. Then you get the animal brain, which has the fight, flight, or freeze. And generally, when you see most animals, they will immediately fight. There won't be a second of thinking, and they just go for the attack. And then, of course, there's also a large amount who'll run. And sometimes there's a combination of those three. But what we see with humans, and what I've experienced in my own life, is that for the most part we tend to freeze. And due to that freezing, our ability to act for our self-best interest has gone out the window. There's a lot of victim blaming these days and victim shaming. And a harrowing example, and I say it with all due respect and love and care for my fellow sisters on this planet who've suffered sexual abuse. There are even female judges to this day who will say to the victim of rape, why didn't you say no? Why didn't you run away? Were you clear enough about the fact that you didn't want it? Now, in my opinion, these judges should be fired immediately and should never be allowed to work as a judge again, because that adds so much trauma to the existing trauma that it's almost criminal. Anyway, having said that, thank God there are a lot of good judges. But what I want to point out is that there are many judges who do the victim blaming. And it's, I think, symptomatic of our society where we tend to glorify the hero. And I love action movies. I mean, instead of growing up with all these beautiful spiritual books, sadly, I grew up with James Bond books. So, hey, what can I say? So that was my path. And of course, I corrected that later on. You have to excuse me. I don't have high-tech machinery here in my holiday home. So I've got to take a little sip. So we glorify the fight modus, right? Because the male action hero, he's always like da na 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 na. I mean, that's the modus, right? And I do feel that there's a need for balance, and there's a need for introverts to be heard, really, truly. And we still also tend to glorify in most social media the extrovert, the people who are really great at selling themselves, the people who are very self-confident or pretend to be. And I want to get back to trauma for a minute here, because, if you look throughout history, many of the world leaders who have created the most havoc all had a traumatic youth. Or bad parenting. If you look at a dude like Hitler or Stalin or Goebbels or Pinochet in Chile, or this Pol Pot character in Cambodia who slaughtered millions and tens of millions of people just because they were intellectuals who had gone to university. I mean, how insane can you be? Even to kill one person. Anyway. So I do feel there's a need for more attention to trauma, more attention to the effects of trauma. I know that Dr. Gabor Mate is doing a lot of great work in that respect. I was doing a training the other day, it's very nice, and I was doing a training on aggression and borderline and all kinds of things people run into when they're working in the social healthcare services and the psychiatric healthcare services. And I did a little movie on Gabor Mate, and when he talks, he's complete. I'm doing a presentation, but he's really like very, and the ladies I was doing for, they're like, oh, he has such a beautiful, calming voice. And then one of them looked at me like, oh, but it's kind of like your voice, Eric. I was like, okay, thank you. Which brings me to the following, and it's not I'm beating my own drum, but it's that I only pulled out of the traumas I experienced because of God's grace. So I feel all our talents are God-given or given from the universe, however you want to call it. And there's this saying, what you are is God's gift to you, but what you make of yourself is your gift to God. And so the fact that I can speak a few languages is God's grace, because that came upon my path. And somebody was saying, God, it's great how the previous video I made that I talk off the cuff and that I don't have any notes and that I've not planned it or, in any way or form edited or cut it. And that is a talent I've gotten. That's not my achievement. Perhaps it's my achievement that I've given it a little bit of attention and tried to develop it, but it's something that has been given. And all of life has been given to us. There's so much, just off on a tangent here, to be grateful for. Our bodies, clothing, food, work, friends, holidays, hot water, you name it. It's amazing. And the people who will hear this message, we are all on a world level millionaires. There's this obsession with billionaires and millionaires. And yet we on this level, just because of what I just summed up, are millionaires. So yay, and thank you for that. Now, back to the subject at hand. I will read a little bit. I was actually thinking of reading my whole book, and then, normally that's where you make an ebook. But I do think that there are people who listen to YouTube and they listen without the video. So here goes a chapter, and it's chapter 5 from my book, My Miraculous Life with an Avatar, A Touch of Gold. So it's called Netherlands, aka Holland, boarding school. I wake up with a start. I hear screaming, the light flashed on, temporarily blinding me. Hands are grabbing me, yanking out of bed. My heart is racing. What agony is coming my way? I catch a glimpse of the alarm clock. It's 2:30 in the morning. Yelling ugly faces around me. These are the big oldest boys, hurting me to my core as their curses and insults hit me as I'm at my most vulnerable, just woken up from deep sleep. I'm terrified as they pull me into the shower. My pajamas ripped half off me. My ankles bleed as I pulled over the hard ridge to the showers. There'd be these little, in the bathroom, they in the old bathrooms, they'd have these little concrete walls, so the water wouldn't go through, and it'd be like rough concrete. Someone yanks out a chain, their ugly, distorted faces twisted with glee and sadism. I am shoved up against the shower head, and some other boys twist my hands behind me and tie me to the shower levers. Then one of the worst monsters turns on the freezing water. And this is, I just come from Africa. I was saturated with heat, so I think I know why I'm always cold. Anyway, it's not true, but I'm not very good with cold. Can hardly breathe between being half asleep and shocked from the assault and then the ice-cold water. They stand and laugh. The heartlessness and inhumanity of their action and insults hurt me to the depths of my soul. I am aghast. And I'd like to add the most painful thing is not being seen, for who you are, because we all want to be seen. We want to be seen for who we are, love, light, peace, joy, worthy. I am 13 years old. It is 3:30 a.m. and I want to die. The nightmare to stop. Every night I lie in my bed terrified of what the next night will bring. Yeah. So, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and it's sure that way for me. My point hopefully is made, the importance of trauma. And I'd like to invite all of you to assess in your own lives, but also in the lives of people around you, to what extent there have been traumatic experiences in your life. And I hadn't thought of this, but I'm saying it and thinking it now. If you need help, reach out to me, info@ericrobertson.nl, and I can help you or send you to someone who can help you. And if there are people you think need help, they can always give me a free phone call or send me an email, and I'll, do a free consultation, see if I can help you on your way. And despite having worked on myself a great deal, I like to joke, but it's a fact. I have done enough therapy on myself to buy a $1 million villa. That's how much I've invested in this here to clear everything up and to get straightened out, so to speak. And why am I saying this? Because I've realized that even now, these deep, the deep traumatic conditioning is something that's always there. So I'll notice it happening, but it'll still happen. Things are, for people who are traumatized, it's never really safe. There's always this, how should I say it? There's always this fragmentation in your system. I like to say that, and I think this applies to a lot of people, that by God's grace in my spiritual path, I've become very clear. And yet I'm also damaged goods. This is a fact. And it's so important that at schools and universities and workplaces, we start to take this into account. And I don't know about other countries, but in Holland, where I'm currently living, bullying in the adult workplace is horrendous. It's causing about 50% of all burnout. The other 50% is due to lack of appreciation and lack of meaning and fear. And fear, of course, ties in with the bullying. So we are a planet that needs to do a lot of homework. And I am convinced that I said no to an incredible Hollywood career, as I've outlined in my previous video. And I know there are a lot of people say that, like, yeah, man, I was like in LA, and I was going to do this audition. They were like into me, but I didn't get the role. No, I had the biggest, hottest manager in LA, New York, who signed me up with a contract, sent me to acting school, and it was really going to happen. And I said no for a myriad of reasons, but the main reason being that I felt that this was my life path. And in hindsight, it's like, oh, couldn't I have done both? But it usually doesn't work that way. You make a choice on your path, and then that's the path. And by default, all the other paths fall away. So I was just watching Robert De Niro getting a Lifetime Award at the Cannes Movie Festival with Leonardo DiCaprio. And always at the Oscars, I'm always like, oh, I always sit and cry, because that was an almost life, And on the other hand, I'm grateful I didn't have it, because, in my mind, I say this to make myself feel better. How can you can only function in that world if you hang out with similar people. And that's why you always see all these hot actresses marry all these billionaires, because let's say, Leonardo's here and we're having a vegetarian meal and Coke and Coca-Cola. And I'm like, yo, dude, how's 2024? And he's like, oh, I grossed 78 million. And he's like, how's your year? And I'm like, oh, I grossed, 780,000 or 178,000 or whatever. Where's the connection? So anyway, glad I didn't do it. Glad I'm here with you recording this video. I really hope this video helps you. I really hope you can share it with people who might need it. I really hope that I can be of service to people who might need this kind of help. I'm in Holland. I do it in Dutch as well. My book in Dutch is called Puur Goud. It's available on my website, ericrobertson.nl. It's available on Amazon.nl or Amazon.com or any Amazon for that matter. I didn't really have a lot of time to get publisher, so I decided to self-publish. And anyway, so there you have it. So, and for those of you who are listening who are traumatized, who have suffered trauma or are suffering trauma, you're not alone, because in my life and in your life, so much of that trauma has led to depression and has led to loneliness and has led to isolation. And just to talk about that, I've had periods in my life where I've been so lonely that I thought I was going to go completely insane. And, in hindsight, you could, it's easy to say, well, you could have gone out and done volunteer work or whatever. And I did, but still the agony and the loneliness. And I think that happens to a lot of people on the spiritual path. It seems like, with the shamans, you go through this incredible physical, mental, emotional suffering as a pathway to be of service to other people. And I'm reminded, I gave a lecture for a school a while ago, And I was telling the teachers there, and I said, look, I said the more suffering, the more growth. There was like a teacher in the back, and she was like, very cute. And she's like, well, I've been happy my whole life, but I've certainly learned a lot of things. I didn't have to be unhappy for that. And I'm like, of course, that's fine. That's great. But that's not the point, guys. Of course, you learn it through happiness, but for some reason, often the biggest fruits are found in the biggest suffering. That's my experience. A lot of people with me. So there you have it. So it's all good. This was it for now, and I'm going to come back to you soon and talk to you about a lot of different topics: spirituality, the spiritual path, meditation, nutrition. I've started a series of videos on numerology, which is a very interesting exact science that says something about your character from the point of view of numerology. And the ancient Greeks actually all studied numerology as well as astronomy and medicine and, language and literature. Anyway, and then it got kind of pushed aside as, woo-woo and spiritual and unscientific. But it's very exact. The whole universe is built on numbers. Even the messages we send each other are zeros and ones. So there you have it. And of course, I'm going to be talking to you because somebody said, oh, can't you talk about some of the quote unquote miracles you experienced? So that is coming your way as well. So there you have it. Wherever you are, have a great day. Have a great evening. Take care. Lots of love. And thank you so much. Oh, and if you do like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe, because that makes the channel grow and reaches more people. All right. Take care.